Hello, welcome back to Because of Winn-Dixie. Today we are reading chapters 15 and 16, which means we're about halfway finished with our book. So if you've made predictions, or if you haven't done that yet, I'd like you to predict what you think is going to happen at the end of our story. How's this story going to finish up? How is this going to end? So make your predictions, write them down. You can email them to me. You can get permission and send them through Dojo, or you can get permission and post them on Facebook. I would really like to hear and see what your prediction is for our book so far. Also, I would like to know what you think about our book. Is it a good book? Are you not liking our book? Remember, your opinions aren't wrong. I'm just curious to see what you think about our book. Okay, so let's get busy with chapter 15. The Herman W. Block Memorial Library air conditioning unit didn't work very good, and there was only one fan, and from the minute me and Winn-Dixie got in the library, he hogged it all. He lay right in front of it and wagged his tail and let it blow his fur all around. Some of his fur was pretty loose and blew right off of him like a dandelion puff. I worried about him hogging the fan, but I worried about the fan blowing him bald. But Miss Franny said not to worry about either thing, that Winn-Dixie could hog the fan if he wanted, and she had never in her life seen a dog made bald by a fan. Sometimes when Miss Franny was telling a story, she would have a fit. They were small fits, and they didn't last long, but what happened was she would forget what she was saying. She would just stop and start to shake like a little leaf, and when that happened, Winn-Dixie would get up from the fan and sit right at Miss Franny Block's side. He would sit up tall, protecting her with his ears, standing up straight on his head like a soldier. And when Miss Franny stopped shaking and started talking again, Winn-Dixie would lick her hand and lie back down in front of the fan. Whenever Miss Franny had one of her fits, it reminded me of Winn-Dixie in a thunderstorm. There were a lot of thunderstorms that summer, and I got real good at holding on to Winn-Dixie whenever they came. I held on to him and comforted him and whispered to him and rocked him just the same way he'd try to comfort Miss Franny when she had her fits. Only I held on to Winn-Dixie for another reason too. I held on to him tight so he wouldn't run away. It all made me think about Gloria Dump. I wondered who comforted her when she heard those bottles knocking together, those ghosts chattering about the things she had done wrong. I wanted to comfort Gloria Dump, and I decided that the best way to do that would be to read her a book, read it to her loud enough to keep the ghosts away. And so I asked Miss Franny. I said, Miss Franny, I've got a grown-up friend whose eyes are going on her, and I would like to read her a book out loud. Do you have any suggestions? Suggestions? Said Miss Franny. Why, yes, ma'am. I have suggestions. Of course I have suggestions. How about Gone with the Wind? What's that about? I asked her. Why, said Miss Franny, it's a wonderful story about the Civil War. The Civil War, I said. Do not tell me you've never heard of the Civil War. Miss Franny Block looked like she was going to faint. She waved her hands in front of her face. I know about the Civil War, I told her. That was the war between the South and the North over slavery. Slavery, yes, said Miss Franny. It was also about state rights and money. It was a terrible war. My great-grandfather fought in that war. He was just a boy. Your great-grandfather? Yes, ma'am, Littmus W. Block. Now there's a story. Winn-Dixie yawned real big and lay down on his side with a thump and a sigh. I swear he knew that phrase, now there's a story, and he knew it meant that we weren't going anywhere real soon. Go ahead and tell it to me, Miss Franny, I said, and I sat down cross-legged next to Winn-Dixie, and I pushed him and tried to get him to share the fan, but he pretended he was asleep and he didn't move. I was all settled in and ready for a good story when the door banged and pinched-faced Amanda Wilkinson came in. Winn-Dixie sat up and stared at her. He tried out a smile on her, but she didn't smile back, so he lay down again. I'm ready for another book, Amanda said, slamming her book down on Miss Franny's desk. Well, said Miss Franny, maybe you wouldn't mind waiting. I am telling India Opal a story about my great-grandfather. You are, of course, more than welcome to listen. It will be just 1 minute. Amanda sighed a real big dramatic sigh and stared past me. She pretended like she wasn't interested, but she was. I could tell. "Come sit over here," said Miss Franny. "I'll stand, thank you," said Amanda. "Suit yourself," said Miss Franny. Now, where was I? Oh yes, Littmus W. Block. Chapter 16. Littmus W. Block was a boy when the firing on Fort Sumter occurred, Miss Franny Block said, as she started in on her story. "Fort Sumter," I said. "It was the firing on Fort Sumter that started the war," said Amanda. "Okay," I said. I shrugged. Well, Littmus was 14 years old. He was strong and big, but he was still just a boy. His daddy, Artley W. Block, had already enlisted, and Littmus told his mama that he could not stand by and let the South get beat. And so he went to fight too. Miss Franny looked around the library, then she whispered, "Men and boys always want to fight. They are always looking for a reason to go to war. It's the saddest thing. They have this abiding notion that war is fun, and no history lesson will convince them differently." Anyway, Littmus went and enlisted. He lied about his age. Yes, ma'am. Like I said, he was a big boy, and the army took him, and Littmus went off to war just like that. Left behind his mother and 3 sisters. He went off to be a hero, but he soon found out the truth. Miss Franny closed her eyes and shook her head. "What truth?" I asked her. "That war is awful," Miss Franny said with her eyes still closed. "Pure awful." "That's a cuss word," said Amanda. I stole a look at her. Her face was pinched up, even more than usual. "War," said Miss Franny with her eyes closed, "should be a cuss word too." She shook her head and opened her eyes. She pointed at me and then she pointed at Amanda. "You, neither one of you, can imagine." "No, ma'am," said Amanda and me at the exact same time. We looked real quick at each other and then back at Miss Franny. I'm going to pause right there for a minute. I did skip a word on the other page because I didn't want to offend anybody or upset anybody, because the word that was used in there is used to describe something really bad. And the way she used it, it was not meant as a cuss word, but I didn't want to offend anybody, so I chose to skip the word. If you're following along, you notice that. You cannot imagine. Littmus was angry all the time. He was covered with all manner of vermin, fleas, and lice, and in the winter he was so cold. He thought for sure he would freeze to death. And in the summer, why, there's nothing worse than war in the summertime. It stinks so. And the only thing that made Littmus forget that he was hungry and itchy and hot or cold was that he was getting shot at. And he got shot at quite a bit, and he was nothing more than a child. "Did he get killed?" I asked Miss Franny. "Good grief," said Amanda. She rolled her eyes. "Now, Opal," said Miss Franny, "I wouldn't be standing in this room telling this story if he was killed. I wouldn't exist. No, ma'am, he had to live. But he was a changed man. Yes, ma'am, a changed man. He walked back home when the war was over. He walked from Virginia all the way back to Georgia. He didn't have a horse. Nobody had a horse except for the Yankees. He walked, and when he got home, there was no one home there." "Where was it?" I asked her. I didn't care what Amanda thought. It was stupid. I wanted to know. "Why," Miss Franny shouted so loud that Winn-Dixie and Amanda Wilkinson and me all jumped, "the Yankees burned it." "Yes, ma'am, burned it to the ground." "What about his sisters?" Amanda asked. She moved around the desk and came and sat on the floor. She looked at Miss Franny. "What happened to them?" "Dead. Dead of typhoid fever." "Oh no," Amanda said in a real soft voice. "And his mama?" I whispered. "Dead too." "And his father?" Amanda asked. "What happened to him?" "He died on the battlefield." "Littmus was an orphan?" I asked. "Yes, ma'am," said Miss Franny Block. "Littmus was an orphan." "This is a sad story," I told Miss Franny. "It sure is," said Amanda. I was amazed that she was agreeing with me about anything. "I'm not done yet," said Miss Franny. Winn-Dixie started to snore, and I nudged him with my foot to try to make him be quiet. I wanted to hear the rest of the story, and it was important to me to hear how Littmus survived after losing everything that he loved. All right, what a place to stop, but we'll stop for there, and we'll read chapter 17 and 18 next.